Ethel tonight. That's my girl. And so we're all thinking of her, and I'm sure she will be getting well soon. And I'd also like to congratulate tonight's other honorees, David Zaslav, Bruce Bouchard, and my former ambassador to Germany, Governor Phil Murphy. Your contributions to business and health, philanthropy, and governance. I love you too. Are consistent with Robert F. Kennedy's legacy, and I'm very, very proud to join you as the newest Ripple of Hope laureate. I'm very humbled by this honor. I'm not sure if you've heard, but I've been on this hope kick for a while now. I gave a big speech on hope. I ran a couple of campaigns. Hope. It's my kind of thing. Somebody made a poster of me with hope. So I'd like to thank all of you for officially validating my hope credentials once and for all. Of course, Bobby Kennedy knew a thing or two about hope. Half a century ago, it was hope in the future, hope in people, hope in our capacity to do better, to be better, that spurred him to challenge a sitting president of his own party and challenge the conscience of a nation. And through steel towns and crowded housing projects and windswept Native American reservations, Bobby reinvigorated an American spirit that was bruised and battered and still reeling from assassinations and riots and protests and hatred. And he had ambition and he had moral clarity. He argued for unity over division, for compassion over mutual suspicion, for justice over intolerance and inequality. And standing on some makeshift platform, maybe the back of a train car or the trunk of a convertible or the back of a flatbed, sometimes speaking into a tiny microphone while an aide held up a portable speaker, he felt authentic and he felt true. Not stage managed or prepackaged like so many people in public life. Which is why when you look at the photos and you look at the footage of that remarkable period, what sticks out is the sea of hands surrounding him. Seemingly everywhere he went, dozens of hands, hundreds of hands, thousands, every shape and every color. The smooth hands of children, the wrinkled, worn hands of the elderly, and they're all reaching upward. This was, of course, before cell phones. It's a little editorial there. Folks were looking for a handshake or just a touch that could remind them of what was true in them, what was best in them, that would remind them that they were part of something bigger than themselves. How he sparked hope, triggered hope, like a flame burning brighter in darkness. And he understood that it wasn't blind optimism that he was peddling. Hope is never a willful ignorance to the hardships and cruelties that so many suffer, or the enormous challenges that we face in mounting progress in this imperfect world. And hope is certainly not the smug complacency of those who've won life's lottery and think it's all because of their intelligence or charm or hard work on their own. Rather, hope is the insistence that no matter how tough our circumstances, there are better days ahead. That the crooked road can be made straight. That out of the ashes a phoenix can rise. That if we persist, despite all of our individual failings and all of our inadequacies, together we can overcome. Together we can do better. A belief in goodness and human ingenuity. And maybe most of all, our ability to connect with each other and see each other in ourselves. And that if we summon our best selves, then maybe we can inspire others to do the same. Now, it's been 50 years since we lost Bobby. And because we still seem to be grappling with some of the same issues that he was in 1968, when I was 7 years old, because we are still dealing with poverty and inequality and racism and injustice, and environmental degradation, and a constant stream of senseless violence, because of all that, it can be tempting sometimes to succumb to the cynicism, the belief that hope is a fool's game for suckers. And worse, at a time when the media is splintered and our leaders seem content to make up whatever facts they consider expedient. A lot of people have come to doubt even the very notion of common ground, insisting that the best we can do is retreat into our respective quarters, circle the wagons, and then do battle with anybody who's not like ourselves. Bobby Kennedy's life reminds us to reject such cynicism. He reminds us that because of the men and women that he helped inspire, because of the ripples that he sent out, because of the often unrecognized efforts of union organizers and civil rights workers and peace activists and student leaders, things did in fact get better. In the years since Bobby's death, tens of millions would be lifted out of poverty. Around the world, extreme poverty would be slashed, and more girls would begin to gain access to an education. Millions of Americans would be shielded by health insurance that wasn't available to them before. The walls of apartheid in South Africa would come tumbling down. The walls of communism and totalitarianism in Eastern Europe would be swept away. The walls barring women and minorities and the disabled and the LGBT communities and so many others from opportunity would buckle.
Thanks for gay rights in Australia. Thank you, Marc.
Thank you. That progress is fueled by hope. It's not fueled by fear. It's not fueled by cynicism. And this is maybe the most important thing, it's not dependent on one charismatic leader, but instead depends on the steady efforts of dreamers and doers from every walk of life to fight the good fight each and every day, even when they're not noticed. Climate change is one of the most formidable collective tests that humanity has ever faced. But for all the climate deniers, for all the fingers firmly planted in the ears, all the heads foolishly plunged into the sand, right now, you have global investment in renewable energy outpacing the spending on fossil fuels. You have activists in the most remote corners of the world saving rainforests. You have American businesses and state and local governments who are cutting emissions, determined to keep our nation moving towards the international goals that we agreed to in Paris. We have to move faster, we have to work together, but we should pause tonight and take heart in the ripples of progress that have been made. America's wealth is becoming even more concentrated in the hands of the few, and workers are too often an afterthought in the pursuit of profits. Yet we just elected a new generation of leaders to local and state and federal office who are pushing for higher wages and who are standing up for unions and who are speaking out clearly and forcefully without hedges or caveats on behalf of economic fairness. And they're a group of representatives who are actually representative. Folks who know what it's like to pay down his student loans. Folks who've tended bars or worked at call centers to get by. A record number of women who inspire and shake our conscience. And they're out there knocking on doors and holding conversations at coffee tables, and they're tweeting and Instagramming in all kinds of ways that are bringing young people into the arena like never before. And in them, we see ripples of progress. And then some young people are just sleepy because they've been here too long, which is why they're crying. I hear you. The horror of gun violence continues to plague our nation, a pain that many in this room know too well. The bullets that took Bobby and JFK and Dr. King are just like the bullets that took Trayvon and those school children in Newtown and those police officers in Dallas and those concert goers in Vegas and those congregants in Thousand Oaks. Yet even there, through the fog of our grief, we see ripples of progress. Nearly 8 years ago, Gabby Giffords had little chance of survival. I remember standing at her hospital bed, and it was doubtful that she would ever wake up. 6 years ago, this weekend, Newtown families knew unimaginable anguish and grief. And today, they're vocal leaders within a movement that has racked up legislative victories in states all across this country. 6 years ago, Lucy McBath's son was shot and killed in the parking lot of a gas station because the kids in a car were playing music too loud, apparently. And she turned her grief into hope and her hope into a seat in the next Congress, running unabashedly against the gun lobby in the great state of Georgia. She won. And then there are the Parkland students. It hasn't even been a year since a mass shooting stole 17 lives at their school. But less than a month after the tragedy, those students had already helped to raise the age to buy a rifle in Florida. They'd already lengthened waiting periods before purchase. A couple weeks after that, they'd inspired hundreds of thousands to march with them in the nation's capital and all across the country. And of course, they haven't won every battle. But online, in the media, in the streets, on college campuses, they have become some of our most eloquent, effective voices against gun violence. And they are just getting started. Who knows what they're going to do once they can actually run a car. Ripples of hope. That's the legacy, that's the spirit that Bobby Kennedy captured. Standing on top of a beat-up car 50 years ago. Those are the descendants of the men and women and children who reached up into the sky, trying to get a touch of hope. We are all descendants. If not by blood, then by aspiration. Because the thing about hope is that it can travel through space and it can travel through time. It's contagious, and sometimes it just looks like it's splashing against the rocks and not making a difference, but over time, slowly, it starts breaking down those rocks. It starts breaking down the walls of injustice and cruelty and ignorance. And Bobby Kennedy reminds us that if we do our best with the time that we're given, then others will take hope in our example. They'll find their own strength. They'll summon others to hope. And that strength, that hope, will course through their children and their grandchildren and all the children to come. Progress is hard. Sometimes you look out and it doesn't seem possible. You can't see it. But the story of the last 50 years is a story of a more just, more peaceful world. I have seen it. I have lived it. You have too. That should not be cause for complacency. It should be reason for courage. It's why I know that it will be the story of the next 50 years as well. So, if it is okay with you, I, for one, am going to be sticking with hope. And thanks to Bobby's example and the example of those who are here tonight, I know I'm not alone. Thank you, everybody. God bless you. Thank you, Karen. Thank you very much.